Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Baylor Scott & White's Sports Performance Center, Athletes Made Here. The Sports Performance Center was developed with one goal in mind: to maximize human performance through movement and recovery. Their team of expert performance sports coaches and trainers will guide you to achieve your performance goals. That's the Baylor Scott & White Sports Performance Center, located at the Star in Frisco. This episode is also brought to you by Allen Dental Studio. Located off Bethany Drive in Allen, their office was designed with you, the patient, in mind, which means an excellent and enjoyable experience. From cosmetics to implants, you deserve a perfect smile, and Allen Dental Studio can make that happen. Also, don't want to leave out another longtime friend of the podcast, SLM Senior Residential Care Homes. With locations in Carrollton and Dallas, SLM Senior Residential Care Homes offers an affordable, high-quality alternative to senior living. Call now at 469-400-7650. That's SLM, spelled Texsen, SLM Senior Residential Care Homes. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Devin, Hasson, and Bryan Murphy. Gentlemen, it is Monday morning, and whereas last week we began the podcast talking about the number of high school football teams that we had left in the playoffs, we were down to 4. As we sit here on Monday, that number has been whittled all the way down to 1. And we will get to the teams later on that had their seasons come to an end over the weekend. We can talk about the sole survivor, the last man standing. Man, Bryan, the Frisco Lone Star hype train just keeps on rolling as they are bound for the state semifinals for the second time in their history. And man, what just another emphatic performance by the Rangers. You know, we obviously dove pretty lengthy into their regional final against Lancaster last week, as was voted on by y'all as the game of the week. And just how is Lone Star going to be able to kind of break the mold of high-powered offenses that just haven't been able to hit their stride against that stout Lancaster defense? And sounds like it was just kind of just business as usual for the Rangers.
It was. I mean, how many times has Lone Star started a game this season with a Marvin Mims touchdown like 2 or 3 plays in? And that's exactly what they did.
You should know what's coming at this point. That's like...
So, you know how we talked last week? It's like, all right, how are these number one receivers getting shut down against Lancaster? Well, I found out they have Lorando Johnson. He's a 4-star cornerback committed to LSU.
I hear they're pretty good.
And so that was the first time I really got to see him and see what he was all about. And Lancaster's strategy was, we're going to put Lorando Johnson on Mims and go mano-a-mano, and Marvin Mims won that battle by a mile. He had 10 catches, over 200 receiving yards, 2 big touchdowns. He had the 85-yarder on the second play of the game. So the first play of the game, Garrett Rangel gets sacked. And I'm like, oh. And it was like, snap the ball, he dropped back, collapsed, sacked instantly, and I was like, oh no. Lancaster's, I was like, oh no. I was like, this is not, I mean, Lancaster is the real deal. Like, this might get, I'm not used to seeing, Lone Star, that happened to Lone Star. I mean, it was just one play, and I'm just internally freaking out, because by this point, I'm kind of invested. I'm kind of, all right, come on, Lone Star. And then the second play from their own 15-yard line just bombs it to Marvin Mims, and I was just like, okay, they're back. There's nothing to freak out about. It was kind of the Trey Bradford show. I know we talked about him a lot too, the Lancaster running back. He's a 4-star, also 3 or 4-star. Either way, he's a stud. And he was kind of having his way. He had 2 touchdowns in that first half, but after that, it was all Lone Star. Lancaster couldn't do anything. They scored, I think, just 7 points the rest of the way from early on in the second quarter. And it just, like I said so many times before, Lone Star just does not have a weakness. They gave up some big run plays early to Bradford and whatnot, but after that they buckled down. Glenn Rice Jr., the quarterback for Lancaster, he couldn't do anything. He was running for his life. He threw 2 big interceptions late in that game, and that's all she wrote.
So I'm seeing here, Rice Jr. Held just 209 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 11 carries though for just 2 yards. So it sounds like that pass rush was bringing him down behind the line.
He was running for his life.
Really?
And like I said, Lone Star just sends 3 guys. That's all they need. Jaden Jones, number 77.
That shouldn't work the way that's
it doesn't.
As efficiently as it does for them. 3 guys.
Jaden Jones is 6'8", and the rest of the decent other guys or Dawson, other guys on the defensive line, man, you just look at them, they're just massive. They look like college football players already. They're huge. They get pressure, and then when you have that linebacking core, wreaking havoc. And then the huge secondary. Montrese Warren had the big interception, and then Blake Gocher had the kind of game-clinching interception, late when they're trying to make something happen. But Lancaster couldn't do anything. And Lone Star, what was it? The most points Lancaster had given up was 42 to Highland Park in an overtime game. Well, Lone Star put up 38. And other than that, we saw what McKinney North and the Colony and Independence were able to do, or not able to do against them, offensively. And Lone Star still played their game. Marvin Mims still had his. Trace Bruckler still had his. Brandon Spencer had one of the more impressive plays I've seen from Lone Star all year. He caught it in traffic. It looked like two guys were on him, somehow brings it in and breaks a tackle, goes in the end zone. Earlier in the game, he catches a pass on the near sideline, literally runs a guy over. And I saw he tweeted that play out the next day. He said something about the weight room or something. He's like, I've been in the weight room or something. So it's not just Marvin Mims. We've been saying that. I've been saying that for a while now. Other guys have been stepping up and making big plays. Like I said, this team is just so well-rounded, and it's scary. And
it helps when you have a quarterback that just continues to, play so far beyond his years, man. This is as good a defense as Garrett Rangel has seen up to this point in the season, and he just throws for 315, 4 touchdowns, a pick. It's just another.
He's just a sophomore.
Yeah, it's wow.
I'm not going to say anything because I picked against.
Are you done picking against Lone Star?
No, I'm not.
Why?
They're running into a team that has been just as dominant as they have. Denton Ryan has not had a game decided by less than 24 points.
They haven't played anyone. I was talking.
They're 5 rounds deep in the playoffs.
They haven't played. Have they played a team like Highland Park? Have they played a team like Lancaster?
I'm not going to dispute that. But when you get to the state semifinals, you can't say that you haven't played anybody.
Okay, I'm saying compared to Lone Star, they haven't played.
Lone Star has a better resume in terms of if we're voting for number 1 in the college football, but it doesn't matter. You just play who you're lined up against. You can argue, Region 2 is far tougher than Region 1. But the fact of the matter is they got there and they've been impressive in doing so. I haven't decided yet. Yes, I did pick against Lone Star, against Highland Park, and I did pick against them last week. It's working out well for me though so far. I'm almost last in the picket line, so you got that for going for me.
What do you have?
I think that Denton Ryan is a team that's gotten close in recent years. Just been able to get over the hump.
It's what, their 4th straight year in the state semis?
And I just, it's a game I'm going to have to really look at because it's going to be an incredible matchup.
Yeah.
But, you can say that, yes, they haven't played a Highland Park, they haven't played a Lancaster, but, maybe Denton Ryan is better than both those teams. They seem to be even more complete package in terms of offense and defense because they've been, just like Lone Star, they've been dominant on both sides of the ball.
So I got to see in the press box, I feel like at the Star on Saturday, it was just, everyone was there. You had
TXHSFB Media Mafia luminaries were.
Literally, you had all the DRC there, you had, Joe Hoyt and those guys, and then you had, Gossett was there. It was just, everyone was there. And then I saw Newspaper Steve. He comes up to me.
Yes.
I hadn't seen him all season.
Old Steve Gamble.
Because Denton Ryan obviously played earlier at the Star. And he comes up to me, and we're talking about Lone Star and Ryan. I said we're gonna have to put the boxing gloves on, next week. And he told me, he's like, I won't even need the gloves and this and that. And I asked him, I was like, man, so as Ryan, obviously they're just steamrolling everyone, but have they played a Lancaster or Highland Park? I kind of knew, and he was like, no, obviously not. But we were just talking during the Prosper Rockwall game, which we'll get to in a little bit, because that was what was going on after the Denton Ryan game, but. Yeah, we were kind of previewing it. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. It feels like these two have kind of been, either them or Highland Park were on a collision course with Ryan at this juncture of the playoffs in some fashion. And you wonder how that experience does play into things on Ryan's end because they've been so close for so many years. It's just been Highland Park that's been the boogeyman for them. But now that that's out of the way, who knows? Maybe this is the year that Ryan breaks through. They've obviously got a ton of talent with quarterback Seth Hennigan, running back Monty Bailey, who just went nuts in their regional final, and then of course Drew Sanders, one of the top players in the country.
Well, and Billy Bowman. They've got 3 very good receivers.
Yes. They always have such great receiver depth,
and their defense has been. They've churned out D1 prospect after prospect for years. So, like I said, it's going to be of all this. Regardless of classification, that may be the most. The most eyeballs of any state semifinal game this week.
Yeah, it's just, man, this road that Lone Star is having to take to get to this elusive state championship is so daunting. With Highland Park one week, then Lancaster the next week. and the winner of Lone Star and Denton Ryan could very well be staring down the number 2 ranked team in the state, Shadow Creek.
And don't forget, Lone Star also played College Station, a team that won state just 2 years ago. Granted, it's not the same team, but they faced them in the second round, a team that had been there and done that in recent years. So I think they have the slight edge over Ryan just because of that.
If they can get through this thing unscathed, man, it'll be, as far as just like championship resumes, this has got to be it would be one of the more impressive ones in recent memory. So yes, man, Frisco Lone Star is still kicking. They play Denton Ryan. That game is going to be 2 p.m. Saturday at Allen Eagle Stadium. Let's see, so we can talk about some of the teams now that had their seasons come to an end. We'll get to Prosper in a sec. While we were on the theme of number 1 ranked teams, we can talk Argyle, who had their season come to a very, very surprising end.
I did not expect that at all.
This was the second half of my 2 games that I was at in Waco all day on Friday, covering out at McLean Stadium, and Argyle. It happened to him again, man. Something about this Waco-La Vega Argyle rivalry.
Only in the playoffs.
I know. They've played each other 4 times now over the last 2 seasons, and it's 2-2, but La Vega's won the 2 games in the playoffs. So something about the postseason just brings out the nasty side of La Vega in this matchup. And man, this one was nasty. I mean, you don't see teams put it on a team like Argyle like this all too often. This was, I believe the number was, this was their most lopsided loss since 2005.
Whoa.
44-20, and that's, again, with a touchdown for Argyle that came within the final minute of the game. So this was 44-13 for a large chunk of the fourth quarter. And so much of, these 2 teams played earlier in the season, back in week 2, and Argyle just pounced on them. They got out to a 28-7 lead. La Vega made a spirited charge there in the second half. Argyle was able to hold on for a 14-point victory. But for a team that is so run-centric like La Vega, you have to just make them play from behind and make them have to deviate from what they like to do. And pretty much from the get-go, this game was played on La Vega's terms. And La Vega didn't even start with the ball, but they got momentum immediately. They forced a 3-and-out, and then they blocked the ensuing punt out of the back of the end zone for a safety. So right there, sidelines going nuts, and then La Vega gets the ball back, and they, I believe they went 49 yards in 12 plays. So just a grinding drive, and you really got to see what this La Vega team is about, and it's really it's one of 2 things. It's either there's really no short to intermediate passing game. They were either going to run their stable of backs, or they were just going to chuck it deep and see what happened. Because that's when you have a team like that, what Argyle was doing is they were essentially putting 9 in the box and just putting their 2 cornerbacks on an island, no safety help or whatever, and just saying, okay, you guys, don't lose your one-on-one matchups. And I mean, they were able to mix in that passing game just effectively enough to, really, to keep Argyle off balance. And I mean, they just had nothing for that run game.
391 rushing yards.
391. It felt like double that.
God.
I mean, it was 7.1 yards per carry, and a lot of that just has to do with that tightness offensive line that they have. And that was the way that head coach Todd Rogers of Argyle put it afterwards, a very apt way of describing it. He said, man, that offensive line, they just consume you. And I mean, between that and just the speed of those running backs, I mean, I'm looking over here, Jarquay Walton finished up with 198 rushing yards. Landry Kinney, the quarterback, had 81. Elisha Cummings had 74. All of them averaged more than 6 yards per carry. I mean, there was just no resistance whatsoever. And like I said, this game was 100% played the way that La Vega needed it to be played. And then on the other end, Argyle just could not So in the first quarter, I want to say, it was either first quarter or early second quarter, they got a big touchdown from Bo Hogaboom to Cole Kirkpatrick. 75 yards, 1 play, that cut it that cut the deficit to a touchdown. And okay, you're thinking, okay, maybe some signs of life. I think they made it 10 to 6, I want to say. And but after that, though, there just was nothing, man. That secondary was stuck to those wide receivers. They couldn't get anything on the run game going. You look, Luke Ferris, their lead running back, was 8 carries for 18 yards. Knox Scoggins, just 1 carry for 1 yard. Hogaboom, 7 carries, 11 yards.
Do you think things would have been different with Tito Bryce?
I mean, you look at that week 2 matchup, and you see that that's because Argyle tactically had to approach this game way different from that first one. They ran Tito Bryce 43 times in that first meeting for over 200 yards. So not having that meant, you essentially had to play a completely different style of football. And obviously, having to play at a deficit versus playing in front kind of influences that. But it just was such an atypical performance from Argyle. Hogaboom just completes only 44% of his passes. There was 3 picks. 3 touchdowns. I mean, Cole Kirkpatrick did his thing, 6 catches, 141 yards and 2 touchdowns because he's amazing. He's essentially the 4A equivalent of Marvin Mims or Jackson Smith-Njigba this year. But yeah, this was just such an impressive display by La Vega, man. I mean, that looked like a team that is primed to, I mean, they might be repeating this thing just like they did last year.
Who's going to beat them now?
I mean, I know Carthage is on a roll too, so that's, I mean, I just feel like that kind of is your, the projected state championship in 4A Division 1 now. But I mean, yeah, that's just considering what Argyle stands for and how they're basically like the Allen of Class 4A. I mean, to see them just get pummeled to that extent. I mean, like I said, you just don't see teams take it to them to that caliber. It's usually much more closely contested. But this is now 2 years though, because it was last year that La Vega beat them 31-14 in the playoffs. Something about this matchup has just it's been rough on Argyle in recent years, and yeah, they just had a really tough time handling that speed and that size of the Pirates on Friday. So yeah, Argyle's done. Let's see, and we can talk. Let's talk about Prosper. I can give the floor back to you, Brian. Yes, you got to see. Man, what a weekend for just stellar wide receiver play.
I got to see the 2 best offensive players in Texas.
It feels like it, man. So yeah, you go from watching Marvin Mims do his thing on Friday to turning right around on Saturday, getting to take your first look at Rockwall and their all-world receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba, and man, Prosper put a scare in them early, and ultimately though it did not ultimately work out though for the Eagles. Their season comes to an end, 59-42, but still a spirited effort by Prosper, it sounds like.
Man, I was so excited to see Jackson Smith-Njigba play. I was on the field before the game just so I could see what he looked like up close, man.
He's real.
This is a real human. Oh my gosh. I'd only heard legendary stories about him. But no, man. Look, for like 10 minutes, like just sitting in the press box beginning of the game, I thought, oh shoot, Prosper, are they better than what we thought? Is Rockwell maybe not as good as advertised? Is Prosper just, what's working right now? Are they, I know they're fully healthy finally. I was told they were missing some key defensive players when they played Jesuit and Allen.
Okay.
Still maybe not the reason why they lost, but they're fully healthy now, and then they just drove down Rockwell's throat first drive of the game, scored a touchdown with ease. Tyler Bailey was awesome in this game. Yeah. That dude's going to be a stud for Prosper in the next 2 years. Crazy, he's only a sophomore. He had a real big game, way over 100 total yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a 75-yarder catch and run in the third quarter where he just broke 3 or 4 tackles. He was just burning people, blowing up by people. He looked really good. But yeah, no, they scored on that first drive. And then I think it was 2 plays later, Braden Locke throws a pick 6. And I'm just like, whoa, it's 14-0, less than 5 minutes into the game. And I'm like, this is not what I expected at all. And then the Rockwell offense finally got the ball and finally, got going a little bit. Jackson Smith-Njigba scores his first of 6 touchdowns on that next drive on a slant. It was like a 14-yard slant. Most other receivers kind of get tackled somewhere around the 5 or 6 yard line. Well, he just broke a tackle, kind of zoomed by another guy, and then
he basically just teleports into the end zone.
He literally did. And then their next drive, just a casual 53-yard bomb, in double coverage. Just nothing crazy there. And then he also added a rushing touchdown. So he scored the next 21 points. And then so you blinked, and it was 21-14 Rockwell. And then they kind of never looked back. Prosper they kept it close. They kept it interesting. Rockwell would, had a comfortable 2-possession lead most of the second half, and Prosper would kind of just chip away. They were just trying to chip away. They'd score a touchdown. I wasn't really impressed with Rockwell's defense. We kind of knew they were a little suspect.
Yeah, they've been had before this season.
Yeah, and so a shootout is nothing new for Rockwell. But if you get in a shootout with Rockwell, you better hope you're.
They're perfectly equipped to handle one.
They are.
Yeah. So
and it's not as if it's a one-man show. You can't just say we're going to put 3 guys on Jackson, and then there's no way.
J.J. Williams. He had 2. The first play of the second half, J.J. Williams, it was a 66 or 68-yard touchdown down the sideline, and I even tweeted out, I was like, whoa. J.J. Williams touchdown, and I put in parentheses, not Jackson Smith-Njigba. And then he did it again in the second half as well. It's like 2 60-plus yard bombs to the house. It's like this team, and they weren't running the ball at all. Rockwell could not run the ball against Prosper at all.
Which is a bit of an aberration because Rockwell has been a balanced offense for most of the season.
See, they were just running into a brick wall every time. They were getting 1-2 yards of carry, just running into that defensive line, and then they were like, okay, come on, Jackson. Come on, JJ. They'd launch it up and then get a big play. And it just kept bailing him out all night long. And Braden Locke, next thing you know, he's almost 450 yards and 6 touchdowns. Jackson Berry, Prosper quarterback, he threw over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns as well. Coming off of a season high last week in the third round, and then he beats that, another season high for Jackson Berry in first year as a starter with 345 yards. It was a fun shootout. But really, after Rockwall took that lead, 21-14, it was close enough for the game to be really interesting, but it was never really any doubt. It felt like Rockwall was in full control from that point on.
So yes, Prosper, their season comes to an end. Still a
heck of a season for Prosper.
Just their second year in Class 6A, and they're in the regional finals. Just exemplary stuff in Prosper, and they're probably going to be just fine going forward. They got Barry coming back next season. They got Tyler Bailey. They're not going anywhere, folks. Yeah, Prosper, stellar season for the Prosper Eagles. We can close this out then with a look at the finale to the TAPS playoffs. Some private school football was all the rage down in Hewitt over the weekend out at Midway Panther Stadium. That's where I was at for a rare noon kickoff on Friday to see if John Paul could complete this dream storybook season of theirs. And you know what? For as many feel-good vibes as there's been for John Paul this postseason, they won their first ever playoff game, and then they parlay that into a run to their first ever state championship game appearance. Sometimes you just lose to a flat-out freaking better team, man, and that's been what Parish Episcopal has been all season. It felt like it was either them or Nolan were kind of the on-paper favorites to hoist the TAPS Division I state championship. And Parish left no doubt, man. They win this one 42-14 over John Paul in a game that, kind of like your game, Prosper and Rockwall, had some earmarks early on of okay, perhaps this could be a bit of a different game than expected. This was a game, they just played 5 weeks ago when Parish won that game 47-7. And John Paul had showed a bit of a renewed sense of spirit since then. They hadn't lost a game, and their defense had just been outstanding, allowing something like only 13-14 points per game in the games played since, including being just a blowout of Nolan, which that really right there was all you needed. Okay, this John Paul team has arrived as being a legit state title contender. But Parish just was not to be denied, man. That offense is just something else. To hang 42 points on John Paul, a lot of it is it centers around that quarterback, and there's Preston Stone. He's one of the top dual threat quarterbacks in the country, and there were times when when John Paul's pass rush broke through, got into that backfield, and it just didn't matter, man. Stone is just so elusive. He had 17 carries for 146 yards, 3 touchdowns, 151 yards passing and a touchdown. There was no touching him. There was no touching their lead running back Christian Benson, who they did a good job getting him in space all over the field. Very kind of Alvin Kamara-esque. He has 74 rushing yards and a touchdown, 113 receiving yards on 7 catches. They had no answer for him either. John Paul started off the game on a really promising note. They got the ball to begin, marched right down the field, got a 36-yard touchdown from Grayson James to Miles Parker on a nice little play down the seam, and Parker just outraced the defense to the end zone from there. And then John Paul, there were a couple moments there in the first quarter that really kind of shifted momentum back on the Parish side, and and I get it. In a game like this against a team with that caliber, you have to take some chances. But John Paul was able to get a turnover in Parish territory, recovered a fumble, but then they throw an interception on the following play. Parish returns that deep into JP territory. They go on to score, and then John Paul on their next drive, they go for it on 4th down. They fake a punt, get stuffed like a quarter of a yard short, really close, but that gave Parish good field position, and they capitalized from there, and just John Paul was just never able to get it back. But Parish, again, they've been doing this to everybody all season. Felt like a team that was really primed for a run like this, and 42-14. It's really no doubts left in this one, as Parish was your TAPS Division I state champions. Still an incredible season, though, for John Paul. One of the cooler stories, at least in Plano area football, that I've covered in some time with this program. Just finally getting on the level of those other juggernauts in the Dallas area, because that's now looking forward. And this was not I said this on Thursday's podcast. This is not just some kind of lightning in a bottle playoff run. This is still a John Paul team that has only 10 seniors. They're going to be right back in this position next year. Now, whether it's enough to get back to a state championship game, we'll see, because there's a reason why the TAPS D1 state title has basically been traded around the Dallas area for the last decade or so. It's because there's a lot of freaking good teams in the Metroplex, especially at the D1 level.
Or recruiting. Yeah. We'll just cut to it. Yes. Which big stud is Bishop Lynch or Bishop Dunn or Prestonwood going to go and convince to transfer to next season? So that's just part of it.
Oh yeah.
It's just, but like you said, we talked about John Paul. and just they've been so much in the shadow of Prestonwood. In recent years, but they lost to Dallas Christian early in the season, and Dallas Christian is a smaller program, but has been a powerhouse in recent years. But we kind of joked earlier, can they beat Bishop Dud? Who's going to take John Paul to beat Bishop Dud? Well, I did, and they won. That was a late regular season game, but I think that's when we just kind of in the office kind of said, okay, well, that's actually kind of a nice win for them. Yeah. Maybe this is a team to kind of keep an eye on. And then obviously that the win over Nolan was the big one. But tremendous job by Coach Teague out there.
I know, man. It's just when you look around the Metroplex, it's so loaded. And this is even with a year where you had the perennial powers like Lynch and Dunn and Prestonwood that had, at least by their standards, kind of either down years or rebuilding years. But this is on top of Parrish. They're going to be. They're the favorite next year too because Preston Stone's only a junior. What was the running back's name? Christian Bennett or whatnot. He's only a junior. So they're going to be right back in this position next season. Christian Benson, I should say. And this is on top of, Nolan had a big return to prominence. So it's really, really tough to get to this position as frequently as teams like, the PCAs and Lynches and Dunns have done. But at the very least now, John Paul has put themselves in position to be mentioned in that conversation, and it's not a fluke. Like, they absolutely earned every bit of this season of theirs. And they're just getting started over there at JP2, man. It's a new era in John Paul II football. So yes, that is a look at the four high school football teams that we had kicking over the weekend. Just the Lone Star Rangers going forward, though. So that'll at least do it for this first half of the podcast. We still had some big happenings, though, just in overall scope of athletics, with the UIL announcing their the biennial cutoff numbers in advance of realignment, and we will discuss some of the local ramifications of that after a quick word from the sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And we are back. We're going to shift gears and go from talking high school football to talking about the release of the UIL's biennial conference cutoff numbers. I don't know where you guys stand on just realignment in general. It's honestly one of my favorite days of the high school athletics calendar. I get so geeked up for realignment and all that because basically it lays the groundwork for what we're going to be covering for the next 2 years. The different schools we're going to get to see, the regions that our teams are going to be competing in, what that means for playoff purposes and whatnot.
It's the closest thing to being on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange that we get.
It is, and it's such an awesome scene. When they have the big old gathering out at the Birdville ISD athletic complex. They're every 2 years. Right in, I believe February 3rd is realignment this year. They do it every 2 years. But yes, you get every coach in the Metroplex. From all over, and it's
really around the state.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it just creates, like you described, the New York Stock Exchange, it's the perfect descriptor for what that scene looks like, is especially once they, when they put the new districts up on the projector, and then you have everybody just going nuts, having to schedule games, and it's just all sorts of chaos, and just you get to, kind of gauge the immediate reaction as if you get placed into a district of doom or whatnot, or if you get a really preferable draw or whatever. It's such a chaotic scene out there in Birdville, and it's a little under 2 months away, but we, with the release of the conference cutoff numbers, it's really the first major step towards that, because now we at least know what classifications our schools are going to be competing in, and that's significant in the sense that you have some that are jumping classifications altogether to others that are really going from like 5A D1 to D2 and whatnot. So let's talk about some of the ramifications locally from the release of the UIL's conference cutoff numbers. We only have one school that is just outright jumping from one classification to another, and Bryan, I don't know if this was anticipated over in Little Elm, but yes, man, the Lobos are going to have to start swinging with the heavyweights, at least for these next 2 years, as Little Elm will be making me jump up to Class 6A. What was your collective reaction when you saw this on Tuesday?
I was shocked. I thought they were going to jump. I knew it was going to be soon. I thought it'd be the next realignment. Okay. They'd go up to 6A. They're preparing for it. They're getting turf baseball, turf softball, all this stuff. They're getting all this, new fields, new everything athletically. They're getting ready. I didn't think it was going to be now, and now it's and also Denton Braswell is jumping up to 6A, which was also very surprising. They've been around for 4 years, 5 years?
Something like that, yeah.
And they're going up, and so you got to think, okay, if we're talking realignment, districts, 6A districts, you got to think Braswell and Little Elm will be together. They're so close. Maybe they get in there with a Prosper. Maybe they're thrown in there with Denton Geyer. Maybe they're thrown in there with, who else is up there? You start speculating, it's like, well, who is Little Elm going to be paired up with in 6A? Are they going to be thrown in there with like Grapevine and Colleyville here? Like,
well, they're 5A.
That's true. Yeah, so it jumbles on my brain. So it's like, where are they going to go in 6A? Are they going to be thrown in with McKinney and Plano and Allen?
It's possible. There's like, because then when you see where you're going to be in a brand new classification, your mind starts racing with like the possibilities for what the new district could look like, especially when you're just a one school district like Little Elm is.
You can go anywhere. Are they going to throw in Louisville and Flower Mound?
Yeah, you're not tethered to any one school, so you're very malleable in that sense, and the UIL can send you pretty much anywhere. It could be a place where they maybe they do take they fill like the Jesuit spot that's right now in 9-6A, and then they join Allen and Plano ISD, McKinney ISD, and Prosper.
Yikes.
Maybe because of the proximity with Braswell. Hey, Braswell's technically located in Little Elm.
It is.
Even though it's part of Denton ISD, they could join that, and then maybe you get them with the Louisville ISD schools, or perhaps with South Lake and Northwest ISD or whatnot.
Yikes.
I don't know, man. You can go a bunch of different directions with Little Elm. That's going to be. I don't even cover Little Elm, but I'm going to be fascinated to see where they wind up. Just because, that seems like a bit of an unexpected domino that's fallen. But yes, man, whether they're ready for it or not, man, they're going to be.
I don't know if I'm ready for that.
They'll be making a jump up in classification for at least these next 2 years. That's really the only school that we had that outright jump to classification. We did have some though that were 5A Division I in football's sake that dropped down to D2. Devin, you can relate to this with Poteet. Was that anticipated that Poteet would be making the drop down to D1 to D2?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of, when they knew their enrollment figures, a month or so ago, they figured, it didn't really matter the cutoff. That West Mesquite was going to remain Division I, Poteet was going to drop down to Division II. So since Poteet opened in 1990, these two teams have been district rivals.
Yeah.
Now that's going to be the case with all other sports because they're still Class 5A.
Yeah.
But obviously, you mentioned football with the split divisions. They're not going to be the same district next year. So they could carry on the rivalry probably in the first game of next season.
Yeah.
But it makes it kind of opens up I guess that 7-5A Division I because you obviously still have West Mesquite, McKinney North, John Tyler, Wiley East, Sherman all stay the same. Texas High also dropped down to Division II.
Okay.
And so you're left with that 5 spot if you want to keep it. And it's already one of the odder geographic districts out there because you got John Tyler, you got Sherman, and you got it's just all over the place. And another caveat that could add to this district is the fact that Longview dropped down from 6A to 5A Division I.
That's right.
Well, the East Texas schools have always been the larger East Texas schools have always had a problem because there's just not very many of them. Tyler Lee's out there on an island, is the only 6A program once again now, and so they just, geographically speaking, it makes sense to link them with the Mesquite schools. So expect that to continue, and now with that. That district dropped down to 5 teams. It's just the most logical thing. John Tyler's already in the district. Longview now as a Division I. You add that to a mix which is already a good top to bottom district, and it just it's going to make things a lot more interesting. You also have a Royce City a growing Royce City high school.
Won a couple rounds deep this year
to Division I. They're obviously a good bet since they're also they're not East Texas, but they're east of the Metroplex. They're a good bet to join that mix as well. Whereas Poteet dropping down to Division II, you're probably looking at a lot of their 13-5A mates with your Forneys and Terrells and stuff like that. But yeah, it's like I said, that 7-5A Division I wish Kendrick was here because I know he's been spouting McKinney North all year, and he said, they backed him up. They won the district. I wonder if he'd be proclaiming the same thing with Longview in that district as well. So
he might, man.
Well, he compared them to Highland Park a few weeks ago on the podcast, so it wouldn't surprise me if he said they'd beat Longview too.
This is once again like the 5A ones that we had change were just for football's sake, because 5A is the only one that has the Division I. Football's the only one that has the D1, D2 structure. So all the other sports, West Mesquite and Poteet are still going to be rivals. It's that same case with the Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD trio was broken apart for football's sake.
That'd be weird.
With Creekview will be dropping down from 5A D1 to D2. Now, much like that with Poteet, they're still going to keep, at the very least, the Newman-Smith rivalry is for sure going to be intact for these next 2 years. I talked to head coach Jay Klein last week, and he said they are still going to schedule the Trojans on their non-district schedule. Still up in the air what to do with R.L. Turner and whatnot, but at the very least, you won't be losing, entirely all of the CFB ISD games, which does, because that's been something at the very least, like they've been in such a tough district these last 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
That, those games at the very end of the season kind of had a nice little symbolic, meaning for that community, especially with Newman-Smith and Creekview playing on the final night of the regular season. So it is good to at least keep that tradition going. I know that's a game that really, galvanizes the community out there in Carrollton and whatnot. And so Creekview drops down from 5A D1 to D2, and we'll see. Maybe they can. Heck, it can't get any tougher than being in the same district as Ryan and Birdville and Grapevine and Colleyville Heritage and whatnot. So. They'll be at the very least looking at probably at least, you'd assume a more preferable draw going forward. Then you had Frisco Reedy, which is going to be bumping up from 5A D2 up to D1, presumably to join the rest of the Frisco schools. And you're thinking just from, I don't want to, the UIL can throw whatever monkey wrench they want into the...
They should take Little Elm spot.
Yes.
It makes the most sense.
Yeah, if you look at the 5A D1 alignment right now, where you have those upper-level Frisco schools, plus the Colony, plus Little Elm for these last 2 years, with Little Elm moving up to 6A, it would just make sense that Reedy slides in and takes that spot. But yes, Reedy, which has had two playoff years in 7-5A D2, one that obviously led to brighter pastures than another, but yes, you get to see... I guess the long-awaited Reedy Lone Star matchups on the football field.
Yeah, it's not the same.
It's not the same. But then you had, elsewhere, Salina. Salina's, their fortunes also changed. They are free from the having Argyle lord over their district and whatnot. They will be making the drop down from 4A D1 to D2. I would assume that they're probably a nice collective fist pump there over in Salina for that one, Brian.
There you go. They don't have to play Melissa either.
Yeah.
So Melissa and Argyle have been a thorn in their back for the last couple years.
Instead, you get the East Texas schools like Gilmer and Pleasant Grove.
We'll see. Well, now that'd be shocking.
Rivalry with Sunnyvale.
See, and we talked about that. Is Sunnyvale and Salina going to be in the same district now? But they're so far apart. But that's what happens when you're.
But they're in a district now with Caddo Mills and Farmersville and the likes. There's just Sunnyvale is one of those odd. It's a small town tucked in the middle of the Metroplex. Sunnyvale's in the middle of Mesquite, Rowlett. Neighbor 5 minutes from Dallas. And so the schools they play are usually out further from the Metroplex a little bit. So I think there's a very good chance that they'll be in the same district as Salina.
That'd be a fun matchup, Sunnyvale, Salina.
And I just loved the trickle-down effect, because now with Little Elm and Braswell moving up to 6A, that takes 2 teams out of the current 8-5A alignment with Lake Dallas and the Colonies, so that things are going to be looking much different for those schools next year. I don't know. It's just such a. Again, I have to kind of take interest in other markets, because there's never any doubt where Allen and Plano ISD are going to wind up when it comes to the realignment numbers. The bigger intrigue is just what's the enrollment figure going to be this time for Allen? And sure enough, they are 41 kids shy of 7,000, which, as you can imagine, was met with a very measured and calm response on social media. Nobody at all raising up a stink about that. And
that's 3 different 6A schools. Is my math right? I'm not good at math, but that could be 3. That's for sure 3 different 5As.
Because I think we took we did the exercise. We took the enrollment of, what was it? South Garland is the smallest 6A school.
Well, yeah, they're opted up. They're actually 5A numbers, but they're.
But if you took the enrollment of South Garland relative to Allen's, and I think Allen is 3.1 times larger than South Garland.
Well, Allen's band is almost a 5A program. They're just under the 5A.
True. It's true.
Wait, so South Garland chooses to be in 6A, or they're choosing to now?
Yeah, them and Name and Forest both opted up in the last. Name and Forest actually did nudge ahead.
I didn't know
6A
that.
line. South Garland did drop down to 5A.
A few years ago.
They were in that district with Poteet and West Mesquite and whatnot, and it didn't work out well for them. They wanted to change. They thought they'd be more competitive, and they got thrown into a tough 5A district. And then just the travel aspect. They weren't traveling far. It wasn't like it was a huge.
Because South Garland's almost in Mesquite, anyways. It's not far.
Well, it's not far, but they also had Forney and Terrell. It was.
They want to stay with GISD.
And they lost a lot of those rivalries because. there's 7 GISD programs. Well, there's only 3 non-district games, and so they lost the annual game with Garland. They lost the annual game with North Garland, and they just decided it wasn't worth it. They tried it for 2 years, decided it was a mistake. So they opted up.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So just.
Elsewhere, form kind of held elsewhere. It was going to be curious to see how Prosper's enrollment was going to be impacted by the development of Rock Hill.
They still grew, right?
They didn't grow. Now they dropped, but not a ton. It was just, I think, just a couple hundred kids that they lost. So there was kind of some, well, is Prosper going to be 6A going forward with like how many kids is Rock Hill going to be accounting for? Rock Hill, their enrollment checked in at, let's see.
They're another 5A Division II.
It was 1798, so they're going to be 5A D2 for football's sake. They'll be in Class 5A to begin. Prosper, though, they only lost a couple hundred kids, if that. Their overall enrollment was 2699, so at the very least, I think their McKinney actually has the larger enrollment than them now, so they did drop below McKinney in terms of the current 9-6A programs, but they're still going to be 6A, so they've handled it just fine so far, so you would expect that just to continue going forward for them.
Now, this is obviously not a team we cover, but we see them all the time in the playoffs and stuff. I'm surprised we haven't brought them up yet.
The one team that everyone was talking about on Tuesday at Highland Park?
Yes, how they magically, every realignment, every re-enrollment period, whatever, they're always, 11 students short of 6A?
Yeah, it was Highland Park plus 11 this year was the cutoff.
And there's some
Highland Park plus 5 is for the old ass.
It was so funny seeing Matt Stepp tweet about the conspiracy theories and everything on Twitter, and everyone's just losing their minds.
Park did go up to 6A, 4
Yeah,
years.
and they didn't fare too well up there.
I mean,
compared to being at 5A.
Their football, I guess, got knocked out in the second round both years. But their other sports are still strong across the board.
They're still going to win tennis every year, regardless of what classification they're in.
And golf, and girls soccer.
Yeah. So and I don't. You mentioned Prosper. That how do you see the current 9-6A? I mean, you mentioned possibly Little Elm joining in because I was looking at 11-6A, which had 7 teams. That's the 3 Mesquite schools, the 2 Rockball schools, Tyler Lee, because they lose Longview.
Okay.
So you're down to a 16 district there. So, they traditionally like 18 districts. I mean, this wouldn't be out of the ordinary to have a 16.
No doubt.
But do you...
Throw in Braswell and Little Elm?
You know what? Stranger things have happened. And if you talk about the travel, well, Tyler Lee's coming from, 90 minutes east. I mean, there's Skyline is the only Dallas ISD 6A left out there. They would make sense geographically speaking. But you kind of have Florida. That's why I was asking about 9-6A because you have a Prosper. Wiley's out there. Wiley makes the most sense to stay with the Garland district, but they've also you could have said that a decade ago, and they've been looked in with the Planos and the Allens before. So a team like Prosper that's kind of out there on its own in terms of being the only 6A program in that district, or like the Little Elm and Braswell, who don't really have any kind of current connection with 6A programs. Do they dance around and factor into that mix with those schools?
What about maybe because they're a little bit more, they're at least east of those 2 schools, what about McKinney ISD? McKinney Board and McKinney? Because if I'm thinking just it would be 6 right now, so if you need 2 to round that to 8, I mean that's a possibility, I guess. I mean, they're going to keep Allen and Plano ISD tethered to tethered to one another for sure. But with McKinney ISD, I mean, Boyd was in the Garland ISD district, a handful of years ago, so there at least is precedent of them breaking apart. It's always just such a fascinating, because we always, I've tried for the last, 2 or 3 realignment cycles to, based on all the research and whatnot that I'll try to do beforehand, to predict what the UIL is going to land on. And it's always, you always know that it's going to be Allen and Plano ISD and, at least for now, McKinney ISD. But then it's always, that 7th and 8th spot that, is,
who would have been there with Richardson? Not too long ago?
It's been a long time. Okay. That was back in in the 2000s and whatnot. But they've had with Louisville ISD in that district of death for a few years here and there. There was them throwing Geyer in there, which was a complete curveball, which would be very akin to taking a Prosper and sending them out to Mesquite.
And do you throw Skyline in with that group because Skyline's one of the largest schools in the state. Just from an enrollment thing, it's we'll put Skyline. I mean, we got the 4 biggest schools in Texas. Skyline's probably in the top 10.
Yeah.
Let's go and put Skyline in with that group just to throw, and then we'll move one of those other teams out, and move Jesuit out, or Jesuit's you mentioned them as a wild card that can float around, Prosper. It's just there's a lot of a lot of things, and you mentioned trying to predict it. It's almost impossible.
That'd be man. This is getting my blood pumping and fired up for Realignment, man. Yeah, just about 7 weeks to go until they reveal the new athletic districts for the 2020 through 2022 school years and whatnot. It should be fascinating theater, and we'll obviously be previewing that a bit more as we get closer to that February drop date. But yeah, that's a look at least some of the local ramifications from the UIL's release of the conference cutoff numbers, and that'll do it for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. Devin and Bryan, appreciate y'all for tagging along. Folks, we'll be back on Thursday to preview Frisco Lone Star and Denton Ryan, plus talk a little basketball as we're next. Everybody except for Bryan's having to seg all the way entirely into basketball coverage now. So talk a little hoops later on this week. Folks, you enjoy your week, and we will talk to y'all later.